want to say welcome back to the Privacy, Information and Ethics Committee as we start in 2023. Hopefully, Madam Clerk and the analysts, you had good time off. I know the analysts were busy with report writing, but welcome back, everyone. So welcome to meeting number 54 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022, and therefore members can attend in person and remotely using the Zoom application. En cas de difficulté technique,
should any technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully.
Participer pleinement aux délibérations. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. I see that we do have one member on Zoom today. And the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. We appreciate your patience and understanding on this. Now, you'll notice that we did receive an amended notice of motion. We're going to be dealing with one issue first, but Ms. Khalid has asked me, because you require substitution for particular meetings, that requires a motion of the committee. So if you want to place that motion on the floor now, before we start deliberating on the 1064 motion. Thank you. Ms. Khalid.
Thanks very much, Chair, and welcome back, everybody. It's going to be a great session, I'm sure. Very briefly, Chair, I'd like to move that Member of Parliament Annie Koutrakis have access to all of our digital binders and that she be included in all committee submissions and document circulation as well, as she'll be subbing me in for, I guess, until June every Friday.
You, Ms. Khalid. I don't see Mr. Green on yet. Where is he? Oh, is it? Okay, fine. We do have quorum, so the motion is on the floor. Any questions, comments? No? We have consensus on that? Okay, thank you, Ms. Khalid. Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 1064, the committee is commencing consideration of the request by at least 4 members of the committee to undertake a study of the subject matter of the report of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner entitled the Ng Report. Again, for members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. Clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Mr. Barrett, we'll go to you first, sir.
Thanks very much, Chair. I have some introductory remarks, but and I'm prepared to move a motion. I would just ask, through you, Chair, if perhaps the clerk could circulate that motion to all members. It's available in both official languages, and they can have the opportunity to take a look at it.
Understanding is that the clerk has just distributed that motion to all members. Et aussi, aujourd'hui, je veux...
Also today, I would like to welcome Mr. Garand, who is replacing Mr. Villemur. It might be for today and perhaps Friday? It could be for the whole week. Thank you.
The motion has been circulated to the committee members according to the clerk. Mr. Barrett, you still have the floor, and then...
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
So we've all received the letter calling for this meeting, and I'm pleased that we were able to have the meeting during our regular committee slot today to take a look at this issue. We've seen that the Ethics Commissioner published late in 2022 the Ng Report. Now, it details tens of thousands of dollars that were paid with authorization from a minister to a contractor, and that was done in an inappropriate way. In fact, the Ethics Commissioner deemed that it was a contravention of our Ethics Act. Now, the issue here, of course, is the personal friendship between the principal at Pomp and Circumstance, Ms. Alvaro, and the minister, Minister Ng. Now, this situation that we find ourselves in is the fifth occasion that a member of Cabinet, a Privy Councillor, has breached Canada's ethics laws. Now, it's important that Canadians are able to have confidence in their public institutions. It's important that Canadians are able to have a full accounting for what has gone on, and the members of the opposition have asked for this meeting so that we can initiate that process. Now, it's important to note, Chair, that this committee has a full agenda, and we have lots of work to do this spring. And this motion has been crafted in such a way that, having spoken with other members, that I hope it can be addressed in relatively short order so that we can continue to do the other work that this committee has planned. That being said, this is some of that important work, and that's why it rose to the level of using Standing Order 106.4 to trigger this meeting. Canadians need to know that that the expenditures that the government is undertaking is done on their behalf and not to the benefit of any individual that in an inappropriate way. We're going to look to find out what the details were in this case, and ideally, we find ourselves in a place in 2023. It's a new year where the series of ethical breaches reach their conclusion. But first, we need to get the details of what's occurred to this point. So as has been said, Chair, we have circulated a motion. It's in both official languages. I'm going to read it into the record in just one moment. But the occurrences that we've seen, of course, 5 violations of the Ethics Act, the Trudeau Report 1, the Trudeau Report 2, the Morneau Report, the LeBlanc Report, and the Ng Report. Canadians are rightly concerned that we've heard an awful lot from them. Certainly my office has heard a great deal from them. Other opposition members have heard a great deal from them over the last week since the release of this report. And the motion that we've circulated is as follows: that pursuant to Standing Order 108.3H and in relation to the Ng Report, the committee undertake a study into Minister Mary Ng's violations of the Conflict of Interest Act, that the committee dedicate 2 meetings to the study, that the committee send for in unredacted format all documents related to contracting with Pomp and Circumstance PR, including timesheets, statements of work performed by Pomp and Circumstance PR under each contract, all work product provided by Pomp and Circumstance PR under each contract, and dates and locations of work performed by Pomp and Circumstance PR under each contract, that these documents be provided to the clerk of the committee in an electronic format no later than 12 noon on the 10th business day following the adoption of this motion, that the committee invite the following witnesses in addition to any further witnesses the committee may consider relevant to appear: Minister Ng, Amanda Alvaro, the Deputy Minister for International Trade, that the committee report its findings to the House and the government table a comprehensive response to the report. Chair, I think that with the number of meetings that are detailed in this, that the other particulars requested, the document production order, it's very narrow. The number of meetings are limited. We're not looking to do an examination of any of the other reports dealing with the Conflict of Interest Act from the Commissioner or any other reports with respect to the code for members. So this is very narrow, very focused, and I hope to find a path forward this afternoon so that we can undertake this work, get answers for Canadians, dispose of it, and then move on to the other work from this committee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. The motion is in order, and I do have Ms. Khalid to speak next. Ms. Khalid.
Thank you so much, Chair. Appreciate this. First and foremost, I just want to appreciate my colleagues across the way for actually engaging in conversations about what we were expecting today with this meeting. And I appreciate Mr. Barrett taking some of our feedback into account in drafting this motion. Although this is the first time that we are looking at the exact wording of the motion, and seeking your indulgence, Chair, if we can just maybe suspend for 5 minutes while I confer with my colleagues on exactly what documents are being requested and the timelines and the logistics as such, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, so the request is to suspend the meeting for 5 minutes, correct? Okay, so we will suspend. I'll give you that chance to look over the motion, and we'll be back in 5. the meeting. We had a little bit longer than a 5-minute suspension. Ms. Khalid, when we left, you had the floor. I'm gonna go back to you, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the suspension. We've been able to have discussions amongst us and hopefully come to an amenable conclusion at the end of this. And I have proposed, I'm not sure if Mr. Barrett would like to take this as a friendly amendment or if you want me to move a formal amendment on this, but to delete the words that the committee report its findings to the House and that the government table a comprehensive response to the report. That is the only amendment that we'll propose, if it's agreeable to everybody around the table.
So I'm not going to accept that as a friendly. I'll accept that as an amendment and see if there's any discussion on the amendment that's proposed.
On consensus for it to pass.
Okay, so the amendment will pass on consensus. We will, it's a new year, Mr. Green, everybody's working together. So now that we've got the motion as amended, we'll deal with that. Do we have consensus on the amended motion? Okay. If you, do you want a recorded vote? Okay, so the motion passes on consensus as amended. Thank you. I went to committee chair training over the break, and it's worked out well. Thank you. And I have a great clerk and great analysts to rely on. Okay, so that disposes. Well, it doesn't actually, because we have to determine now, and we'll go to committee business. And in the context of committee business, you've asked that there be 2 meetings on this particular motion. So we have got just for the committee's knowledge, we've got the lobbying commissioner that's coming in on Friday. We've already pre-scheduled that. And she has agreed to come in for 2 hours to deal with the proposals that she came up with on changing the lobbying code of conduct. So she will be in here on Friday. In addition to that, I've had numerous requests on the ATIP since the tabling of the ATIP report by the Treasury Board President in the House of Commons. I've asked, the Information Commissioner has asked to come back to this committee, and we have had other requests to reappear before the committee. So that's dealing with the ATIP. On this issue, here's what I'd like to do, if we can, to deal with this next week. Friday, we've got the lobbying commissioner, and then next Tuesday and Friday to deal with this motion that just passed. And then we can move on, and this is where the discussion needs to take place, whether we focus on the ATIP study. We've got a lot of irons in the fire here. The ATIP study, we still have the lobbying code of conduct. We've got the foreign interference study that we're waiting to start. And I appreciate the fact that everybody has submitted their witness lists on that. But we also have 2 other issues that we need to dispose of as well. Number 1 is the ArriveCan app, which is still hanging, and the Roxham Road study, which is still out there as well, which has been suspended. So those are the things that we're dealing with. So my suggestion to the committee, and I think the clerk and the analysts can deal with this, if we deal with this motion that just passed next week, and then we move forward with some of the other issues. To me, the priority would be the ATIP study, because there's a lot of interest. And I expect that when the lobbying commissioner comes on Friday, there's going to be some others that are going, we've heard from others that want input on the proposed changes to the lobbying code of conduct. So between the lobbying and between ATIP code of conduct, that's the decision we have to make in terms of what the priority. But I hope that the committee agrees with me that we'll deal and dispose of this matter next week, Tuesday and Friday, and then we can come back and deal with either the ATIP or the lobbying code of conduct. Ms. Khalid, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I do have some remarks as to the list that we have pending. One thing just on the motion that we've just passed, obviously would depend on the minister's availability as well, I would assume. So pending the minister's availability, I don't think it should be a problem. But I do have a point of clarification. Perhaps I'll ask from you, Chair. With the foreign interference study, I know that we had said that was the first thing that we were going to do. Procedurally, how does that work when we've all agreed or voted on a motion that says that this is the first study, and now we're kind of delaying it a little bit further? That's another one. And with respect to Roxham Road, I know that we had adjourned the debate or the discussion on that specifically because members were not really interested in pursuing. So I would appreciate if we could wait for Monsieur Villemur to return before we pick up any discussions on that one, because I know he was interested in that. And that's all I have for now. Thanks, Chair.
I'm just going to deal with some of the questions that Ms. Khalid asked. And this is where we stand right now, right? We've got ATIP, and we had the Treasury Board report submitted to Parliament. Lots of interest in that. We've got the Lobbying Code of Conduct, Commissioners coming Friday, lots of interest in that. And then, of course, the China interference. And so this is where I'm trying to juggle and trying to seek the committee's consensus on where we want to go after next week and what that priority is. Now, I've spoken with Mr. Villemur, and I know he would like to start the foreign interference study as quickly as possible. But I am going to ask Madam Clerk in the motion on the foreign interference study, if I recall, there was the word immediate in there or something to that effect, correct? So, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was an amendment, actually, that was moved and adopted so that it would be a priority of the committee. However, at the end of the meeting, some of the members said, notwithstanding the fact that we say it's a priority, we give the committee a little bit of workaround.
That's what I recall. And just for the benefit of the committee, we have up until the House is set to adjourn in June, and I know it's early to be talking about that since we just got back, but we have 30 meetings scheduled of this committee from this point forward. So with everything that's in the air and all of the studies that have been asked for, we've got to be mindful of trying to fit all of those in. My goal is to fit all of those in, but if I was to have a priority right now, for me as chair, ATIP and the Lobbying Code of Conduct, because I'll remind the committee as well that we did send a letter to the Lobbying Commissioner asking her to hold off on gazetting that because there was interest on the part of the committee and others outside of the committee on understanding a little bit more what some of those proposed changes were. So that's where things stand right now. Mr. Barrett.
The meeting Friday makes sense as it's scheduled. I'd like to see, as I indicated, the 1064 directed pair of meetings disposed of quickly. Obviously, as Ms. Khalid said, we'll need to see if we can get the minister. Rather, when we can get the minister. And recognizing that the foreign interference study is a priority, and there are competing priorities with ATIP and others, and I know that there are other motions that are in other members' names that they have a new interest in, and so those would likely want to be addressed in this session as well. Once we get past the next 3 meetings, to ensure that we do prioritize the work that we plan to do on foreign interference, I would suggest that unless the committee, it's the will of the committee, that we then only populate foreign interference meetings until we dispose of that study. I would suggest that we dedicate 1 meeting per week after next week to foreign interference, and then populate the other meeting each week to wind down those other priorities, because the different studies rank in different spots for different folks, but we have stakeholders who are interested in all of them, and then that way we can do that. And disposing of the 1064 meetings next week, as we've determined that we are not issuing a report, then it would be closed, and we have an awful lot of loose ends. So I think that is something that once we've had this discussion and it informs the clerks and analysts with respect to our priorities, and you've had those conversations with Mr. Villemur, having a draft work plan, come forward, in the short term, then we can plan to conclude some of those studies. But I just, sorry, Chair, and I apologize for interrupting.
That's okay.
I would just flag in Mr. Villemeure's absence that that foreign interference study is it's going to be number one with a bullet for him. I won't speak for his colleague who's here for in substitution, but I share that as that was the sentiment of the room when it was passed in December.
So I appreciate the input, Mr. Barrett. So I think we have consensus then about what we're trying to do for next week. Vendredi, le commissaire de...
Friday, the lobbying commissioner will be here.
Next week, we, again, subject to the minister's schedule, we will plan on having the subject matter in the motion that was passed earlier today in those two meetings. And then following that, if I'm hearing everyone correctly, and Mr. Garon,
Mr. Garon, I'll move to you in just a second.
was a priority for this committee. And the fact that Mr. Villemure is not here, I know that it's a priority for him that we start that as well. So my suggestion, and I agree with Mr. Barrett, is that we start that in the following week, and that would be the week of February. What have we got? We've got the 3rd, 10th, the week of February 14th.
February meeting, February 14th.
14th.
Then meeting on February 17th.
Right.
Then for 2 weeks, the House is,
Yeah.
is not sitting.
Okay.
And then we're back March
Okay.
7th.
Okay. So if we're all in agreement on where we go Friday, where we go next week, the only thing we have to discuss and finalize is where we go in the following week, that week before the 2-week break week. Monsieur Garon, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Garon, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for welcoming me to your committee today. I don't want to repeat what was said, but I can confirm that for René, the study on foreign interference is a priority, and it needs to be done in the short term. I'm replacing him this week, but he'll be back next week, so you won't have to wait for him to return. He will definitely be there. I think that there was a relevant motion tabled today, and we would be ready to start next week because Friday is already taken. So we'd be ready to start with the Ethics Commissioner and the Minister. And once a week, if we could focus on foreign interference, that could be good. And I agree that it be one meeting a week, since that seems to be what the interest is. It doesn't have to be every Tuesday or every Friday. We could be flexible if there are witnesses from Europe, for example, but so we could be flexible, but that's what's expected by René.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Garon.
Je veux...
I would prefer that if we have a meeting on foreign interference, that it be every Tuesday or every Friday. Because we also have the Information Commissioner who would like to come back to our committee for the report that was tabled in December. So perhaps we could start the foreign interference study on Thursday next week. Is that all right?
We're going to, did I say Mardi? I meant Mardi, sorry. Right. It was Tuesday and Friday, which are our new meeting dates, okay? So my preference is to start this on the Tuesday that after next week on the foreign interference. Go ahead, Ikra.
Thanks, Chair.
Ms.
I'm just wondering, are there any deadlines or any other urgencies with respect to the ATIP report that's been tabled or anything else that's on our agenda?
No. No particular deadlines. I will remind members of the committee that the analysts were charged with issuing or writing a draft report. If we're going to pick up on the ATIP study again, then my suggestion would be, and I've had discussions with the analysts as well, is that we just add on to that report before tabling it to Parliament, especially if we get to that very quickly. So, that's the only thing that we have, and that report is due, I think, February 11th, 10th, somewhere around that range.
It could be distributed by the end of, it should be distributed, by the end of next week. Yes.
Okay, so that's the only thing that I would think. On the other issues, other than the prescribed meeting dates up to a maximum or a minimum, we have no deadline on any of these other reports, okay? Monsieur Guérin.
Juste pour revenir à la question que vous...
Just to come back to the question that you asked me, I had some information to get. Of course, you have timelines, but for some of our witnesses, there will be issues with different times, so it might be better to have our foreign interference days on Friday. It would be easier to organize with witnesses.
Moi, je suis en...
I agree. Perhaps in the morning it might be an issue for some witnesses, but we'll see.
Okay, so I do want to respect Mr. Guérin speaking on behalf of Mr. Villemure. So is there any problem if we deal with the foreign interference studies on Fridays then consistently? Is that a problem once a week? Okay. Ms. Khalid?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering and humbly suggest perhaps we can look at a proposed work plan for the next 30 meetings. That way we'll have a better idea. I mean, if we're going to be doing multiple studies at the same time, then, obviously I want to prepare myself, and I'm sure members want to prepare themselves, for what is next on the agenda. And Chair, I will also seek your guidance. I did provide a notice of motion. I will ask you when would be the best time to table that.
So on the work plan, I am going to take it. So the challenge that we have right now is really getting through the next couple of weeks, right? Because everything stopped in December. We knew where we were going to stand on Friday. Next week, we know where we're going to stand pending the minister's schedule. It really is the following week that I want to get down, and then get down to having those two meetings on the Tuesday and Friday, because it helps the analysts and the clerk contact witnesses. Okay. I will make a commitment to the committee that we will have a work plan set out, and I'll sit down with the clerk and the analysts so that after those weeks, we'll know what the schedule is going to be like. They'll know what the schedule is going to be like so that we can determine who is going to appear in front of the committee and determine the timelines based on the motions and how many meetings were scheduled for that. So I'm going to make that commitment to the committee, okay? So given that, I see you, Mr. Fergus. Given that, in the week following next week, if we've determined that we're going to deal with foreign interference on the Friday, I would like to invite the Information Commissioner to come before the committee on Tuesday afternoon to discuss the tabling of the ATIP report by the Treasury Board President. Okay? So that would set us up for the next 3 weeks as far as where we're going with meetings. And then the work plan will be presented to the committee after that. Okay? Mr. Fergus, I saw your hand, but I want to reiterate what my preference would be before you speak. So please go ahead.
And I actually support your preference, Mr. Chair. I was just hoping that, and I trust you and the clerk and the analysts to make the appropriate decisions, but if on occasion in our foreign interference study that if there's a particular witness who is not available to come on a Friday but is available to come on a Tuesday, I hope that you would have flexibility from the members from time to time to adjust accordingly.
I appreciate that, Mr. Fergus. I know how important that study is to this committee, and we will try to accommodate the witnesses as much as possible, even if we have 1 hour of a witness because they couldn't be accommodated for Friday. We'll make every attempt to do that, okay? So thank you. All right, so that is our work plan for the next 3 weeks. Everybody is okay with that? Madam Clerk, you good? Analysts, good? And so the next issue And this brings me to Ms. Khalid's issue. I know that you did put a notice of motion and you submitted it to the clerk. We're in committee business. If you wanted to deal with that now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, although I do admit I have not canvassed my colleagues to see their interest in this, but this is something that I think is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in our community as we see, our youth engaging in digital activities and how data is being used. I think this is the perfect committee to study this issue. So, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I move that pursuant to Standing Order 108, sub 3, sub H, the committee undertake a study of the use of TikTok and its parent company, ByteDance Limited, and their involvement or use of private information of Canadians for the objective of data harvesting and unethical or illicit sharing of personal information with foreign entities. That the committee study whether this private data and information of Canadians is adequately protected and stored, that the committee invite relevant witnesses from the Canadian Communications Security Establishment, key executives from ByteDance Limited, relevant cybersecurity experts and watchdogs to testify, that the committee devote a minimum of 3 meetings with witnesses to this study, and that the committee report its findings to the House.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. So the only thing that I would ask is, again, given the tight schedule that we've got in the 30 meetings, that there be some discretion left to the chair to schedule those meetings at a later date. It's not something that we're going to get to immediately, but I don't want to diminish or dismiss the importance of what you're proposing here, because I think it's important, but the motion is on the floor. Comments, Mr. Green?
I certainly concur with the importance of finding ways for us to examine the inherent privacy protections for Canadians on social media platforms. What I do caution against, though, is limiting it in scope to one particular company. I'm a firm believer that what we witnessed with Cambridge Analytica, with Facebook, and what Mark Zuckerberg was capable of with the various insurrections around the world, Twitter with Elon Musk, that we would probably benefit to broaden the scope of all social media platforms. The challenge that I have when you single out one particular company is, while I think they're all, villains in this regard, we're going to miss some of the other hostile actors as well. And so I'm just wondering, around the table, if there'd be an appetite to broaden the language of the motion to include references to all major social media platforms, so that when a security analyst comes, I would suggest that they would come prepared to speak on all the companies, because they would have done security intelligence threat assessments on them. And I think it'd be better for the House to receive all the information, So that would be my preference. And I will say that I'm also cautious of sometimes the rabbit holes we fall into doing what I'll call red baiting around China in particular. China's not the only hostile actor in the world. Let's be very clear about that. There are many hostile actors. Well, I'm not suggesting they're not one as well. I don't want to just always have the attention on China, and I think that we should look around the world and referencing the on-device tracking that we had, we found that there was numerous countries kind of involved in this, and it'd be interesting to see where the other ones fit into this discussion as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'm just, so did you move the amendment? I was talking to the clerk. So moved about all other social media platforms. I'm just going to go, excuse me, Mr. Green, to the analyst. Alexander, I know in 2017 there was a study done on social media platforms and the issue of privacy, et cetera. Maybe for the benefit of the committee, you could talk about what the study included and perhaps what some of the findings were, and whether, in fact, this would be a repeat of something that we've already done.
Sure. So I will have to jog my memory. It was what Mr. Green referred to. It was when the Cambridge Analytica affair was brought to the public eye, and so it also involved Aggregate IQ, which is a Canadian firm that was involved in that. And so the Privacy Commissioner did an investigation on this, and then our study was a broader look at how data breaches from different social media platforms could have an impact in many ways, but also on the democratic process, because as you will remember, Cambridge Analytica had some links with the Brexit vote. And so it led to a study that lasted almost a full year. It also created this Grand International Committee, which regrouped different parliamentarians from different parliament. We went to London, they came here. And it led to 2 reports, a preliminary report and a final report with many recommendations, but I would have to go back to tell you exactly what the recommendations were. But it was a very broad study, and it did focus on Cambridge Analytica, but also on like broader recommendations as to how better to regulate social media platforms.
I had Ms. Khalid, and then over to you, Mr. Green, after that. Ms. Khalid?
Thanks, Chair. And just building on that, I realized that we, just had a fulsome discussion about how limited our schedule is and how much we have on the plate. What I'm proposing in this motion are just 3 meetings and a report. And I would like for us to spend those 3 meetings kind of doing a deep dive into something that I don't think that this committee's looked at before, and that is specifically TikTok and its parent company. I know that we've had many discussions, not just in this committee, but in many committees around the House on various social media platforms. I just feel that TikTok is one that is quite new and one that we haven't really done a deep dive in. And within 3 meetings, I think it's better for us to narrow the scope as opposed to broaden it. I'm sure that we can reference other reports that have been commissioned by this committee in the past in what our findings will be, but I do think that we should limit it to TikTok as it stands.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. Mr. Green.
Thank you. So a lot's happened since then. The January 6th insurrection, the convoy, the Brazil insurrection in Brazil. We just had Facebook in the news selling information to Home Depot. I'll just put this very clearly to my friends in the Liberal. I will only support this if I have the latitude to ask other questions. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in that when we have subject matter experts, that I have the latitude to include companies besides TikTok, given what has happened over the last 2.5 years. A lot has happened since Cambridge Analytica. So if it's 3 meetings, fine. If it's 4 meetings, whatever. But if we're going to do this, let's do this well. And let's take our blinders off and realize that there are a bunch of hostile actors. Surveillance capitalism is real. AI and Moore's Law means that we are light years ahead of where we were when that report came out. And I think it would be incumbent on us to take that seriously and to be open to those discussions when the time arises.
Okay, so just Mr. Green, you did move an amendment. So are you withdrawing?
No, the amendment is to include all social media platforms.
Correct.
Drawing on the same witness list that Ms. Khalid put forward. I want the latitude to be able to have a full discussion and not just put blinders on around TikTok.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Khalid, I did see your hand up.
I think that should be okay, although I am then concerned whether 3 meetings will be enough for us to really bring in the witnesses that we would need in order to study all of that.
Oh, my suggestion to that is that we say a minimum of 3 meetings on the motion, and then see where it takes us. Okay? Now, am I going to need an amendment on that then? This says minimum? Okay, perfect. So the motion says that. So we're still dealing with Mr. Green's amendment. Any further discussion on Mr. Green's amendment? Do we have consensus on that, or do we need a vote? I don't see any objections, so on the amendment carries. The main motion as amended, then. Well, you can't jump to that conclusion right away. Look left, look right, carried, I get it. Any other discussion on that? So on the main motion as amended, we have consensus on that? I'm not seeing any objection. Okay, so that motion carries as well. Thank you, Ms. Khalid. Yes, it's like French immersion. You just immerse yourself into chair school, and you figure. Yeah. Okay. So Ms. Khalid's motion passes. That's where we're at right now. So I want to thank the committee because I think we do have a good game plan for the next 3 weeks. And then we will deal with the work plan. I commit to having a work plan sent out by the end of next week to all members of the committee so that it's very clear where we're going up until June 30th. Keep in mind as well, and this is something to consider, that there may be pieces of legislation that we're required to deal with at the committee, which may upend some of those studies as we move forward for a day or two or whatever the case is. So we may have to, the work plan may have to be fluid, keeping in mind of legislation. So seeing no other, yes, Ms. Khalid.
Apologies, Chair. I just wanted to ask you, I know that we have a deadline of February 8th to submit any travel plans. I'm not sure if you wanted to canvass the room, if the committee wanted to go travel somewhere.
I will canvass the room to see if the committee needs or wants to travel anywhere as a result of the work that we do in this committee. Mr. Barrett.
Well, the committee is undertaking a study on Roxham Road, and I do think that there would be an interesting opportunity for members of the committee to travel to that site and to speak with officials who've, who are now established and entrenched there. That being said, the committee schedule at this point does not support travel. So I would say that it's not it's even though that would take up a day. It would require analyst support, support from our clerk, as well as translation services. So I don't think that there's any travel that the committee must undertake at this time.
Mr. Fergus.
Excuse-moi. Je veux pas contredire mon chef.
I don't want to go against my colleague, but before Christmas, before the break, I had suggested that 4-hour study on access to information that we might want to take advantage of the proximity of Library and Archives Canada in Gatineau, and we could perhaps go there. Some witnesses had mentioned that it's difficult to have access to those documents and the amount of time that it takes to make archives public or historical documents public. And so I think it might be a good idea to see it firsthand and to be able to speak to the National Archivist who is there. And it's not far. It's not far. And it only costs us one bus ticket. Inaudible. We'll all go in Mr. Gord's minivan. Mr. Fergus, we have until the 8th of February to send in a request for travel. Perhaps after this meeting, I will discuss this with the clerk and we'll propose something if that is the will of the committee. Are we all in agreement that we propose a trip to Gatineau to visit Library and Archives Canada, Mr. Gould? I think it would be easy to do that before Friday, and we can just decide to meet there. We don't need to organize transportation. Those who are in Ottawa can take a taxi. Those who live in Gatineau, we can just get there because we could start our day there and then come back for the House or for the committee. The clerk has something to say? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gould, for that comment. If the committee wants to do it during the time of a meeting, they can do it. But even if it's not far, as soon as the committee wants to leave Parliament Hill, they need to send a request to the liaison committee and subcommittee. But if that is what the committee wants to do, we could send that to our request to liaison. And I sit on the liaison committee, so if I propose a trip, I will work with the clerk to do so. All good? Are we all in agreement?
Mr. Gatto?
Mr. Gall? I seem to understand that it might be easier outside of the hours of this committee because there's a lot of work to be done. So it might be easier to maintain regular committee hours and go to Gatineau to the riding of our colleague or the neighbor riding of the colleague. If we simply propose that we want to travel, it doesn't mean that we will. We have a deadline of February 8th to propose it. I would prefer to propose it, and if the committee decides that we don't have time to travel to Gatineau for that study, then we won't do it. But we need to have it approved beforehand.
All right, so we're all in agreement. We'll make sure that we propose something to the committee. I thank you for that, Mr. Ferguson, for reminding me of that. Any other business? Seeing none, Ms. Khalid? Seeing none? You're good? I'll move to adjourn. There we go. Thank you.